Hello friends, welcome back to the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation community channel. My name is Melissa. Today I thought we would hang out a little bit and I will share with you 5 books that I grabbed this week from the library and 5 books that I would like to reread this year. So to start out, I have first that I grabbed from the library is this little teeny tiny Ernest Hemingway book, The Torrent of Spring. And I have not read anything by Ernest Hemingway yet. And there are a few other well-known authors out there, authors of classics, that I'd really like to get a little bit more into, but I get easily intimidated with books that are, like 600 pages to sometimes 1,000 pages, and it just feels like way too much for me to handle at one time. So I am looking for some shorter works that I can get to know these authors, get to know their voice, and experience them in some way that does not feel intimidating to me. And I was at the library browsing, and this little book caught my eye, and for me here, it is springtime, and I thought it would be a great time to experience the torrents of spring and to see what the writing of Ernest Hemingway is like. So that is first on my list. The next is actually a reread / library book. So I got my library slip in here. It is The Letter Tree, and I was lucky enough to read an early copy of this book, and I just absolutely fell in love. It is, You've Got Mail meets Romeo and Juliet. And when I saw that, I was absolutely sold, and the book exceeded my expectations. It is truly a treat. Now, I read this on my Kindle, and there's something to me about reading books on your Kindle or e-reader or your phone versus holding them in your hand and reading them. While I love both mediums, I really wanted to experience this book in physical copy form. So I requested it from the library, and I am really excited. I think I might even start to read this next. I just finished our book club book this morning, so this might be my read to start this evening. We shall see. I'm gonna make my little pile down here for my cats to enjoy. All right, the next book that I grabbed from the library is The Lions of Fifth Avenue. I have not read anything by Fiona Davis yet, and I see her name come up so frequently, and there's a lot of books of hers that are on my list of books that I would like to read, but this one really caught my eye. I am going to use this. I don't think I have it here, but I have printed out our May reading challenge, and one of the prompts on the challenge is to read a book with a place that kind of mirrors the grandeurs of Pemberley. And I thought that the lions that are outside the New York Public Library, and it being such a stately place, kind of fit that prompt pretty well. So this is a library book that I grabbed from this week. All right, the next book that I have, this was one of those books when you are kind of walking down the aisles and browsing, and you're kind of walking sideways like this and like this as you go through the aisles, but it just caught my eye, and I immediately knew that I wanted to read it without knowing what it was about. It was just the cover sold me. And this actually is the dramatic story of how a humble bookseller fought against incredible odds to bring one of the most important books of the 20th century to the world. It is about Sylvia Beach, who opened Shakespeare and Company in Paris in 1919. And in one of my previous videos, I was talking about time periods in history that I want to explore a little bit more. And that early 1900s era is really something that I am interested in adding to my reading experience this year. So this book fit the bill for that. And then the last one, I had just added it to my list of books that I was interested in exploring a little further, and then I saw it at the library, and I thought it was fate. It was meant to be. I needed to check it out and bring it home with me. And that is Woman 99 by Greer McAllister. And this book just sounds really intriguing. And it is a Gilded Age story about a woman whose sister is committed to an asylum. and I believe it's under False Pretenses, and she goes on an exploration, and it's about the story of these women in early Americana who are put into these asylums, basically because for whatever reason they want to get them out of society, not because they truly need to be there. So she risked everything and has herself, I believe, put into the asylum to see what's happening and exploring there. And that's about all I know. And it is, I believe it's listed as a thriller, which is not something that I normally explore, but it just sounded too good to pass up. Those are the 5 books that I have from the library to explore. Now let's get into books that I would like to reread. So I was watching a video, and I can't remember who it was from, but she was talking about rereading and how she never really explored rereading previously, and it's something that she's looking at with new eyes and wanting to get into. I have always been a rereader, but I read so many books that sometimes I forget about ones that I want to go back and to explore again. So I thought I would grab some books and share them with you that I believe are worthy of rereading and that I want to revisit myself. So the first up I have is Miss Lattimore's Letter. This book is persuasion vibes. So if you are a persuasion fan, you love letters in stories, and you like a little bit of whimsy, this is a really fun book to read by Susanna Lane. It says, the woman who never made a match of her own is making matches for everyone else in this hilarious Regency era comedy of manners. So don't necessarily think the seriousness of Anne Elliot, but I do think it has some crossover if you are a persuasion fan. The next book that I have is The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post. I don't know what it was about this book, but I absolutely loved it. I was intrigued with her story, being from state of Michigan, and her story has a big part at the beginning about growing up in Michigan. I felt that kind of connection when you read about somebody that lived in the same areas that you have. Just a fascinating life, and really highlights, I think, some of the differences of the limitations she had being a woman in the time period that she lived in, and all that she was still able to accomplish despite that. The writing is magnificent. I have nothing more to add other than I highly recommend reading this book. The next on my books that I will definitely be rereading. Now, this one I just read last year, so it hasn't been a terribly long time, but it is The Engineer's Wife. I was fascinated by this book. It is a tough story. It really shares a lot of heartbreak, but I found it to be a really fascinating look of so many different aspects of it's Emily Warren Roebling, her life, and also it really dives into like the sort of mechanics of the time period and how they were building, what they were doing, and that is not something I would have thought that I would find fascinating, but it was really interesting. It is based on the story of building the Brooklyn Bridge. So that is in New York. It's a totally fascinating book. Highly recommend that one. The next book that I had is What the Lady Wants. Ooh, can you see that cover? It's a very glittery cover, so I think the camera might have a difficult time picking it up. But this one is, I think, fashion. If you like stories about, if you've ever seen the show Paradise, set in a shop in the early turn of the century. And this one kind of explores that time period of fashion in stores and catering to what women would like to see in a shop, and it highlights some of the things that you don't really think about there not being restrooms for women when they had gone out shopping, and really revolutionizing what the shopping experience was like for women back then. It really gives a dive into the private lives of kind of the rich and wealthy of that time period as well, and it was, again, just a really unique setting and really interesting behind the scenes. then the last book that I have, and this cover is not shown too often, but I had an advanced reader copy of this one, is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Padlow. I remember being so captivated by this book, and it is a hefty story. And when you read about characters from Pride and Prejudice or any Jane Austen novel, you always get a little nervous. Are they going to do that character justice? And this is Mary's story. It is absolutely breathtaking. I remember for the year after I read it, just thinking about this book, ruminating on how it tied together, and just overall absolutely loving it. And I am starting to get a little fuzzy about the details, so I would like to reread this within the next year because it was an utter delight. And I think Mary is one of those characters that is often dismissed and overlooked, and I remember feeling very rewarded for Mary that she was able to get the story that she truly deserved. That wraps up the 5 books that I have from the library and the 5 books that I would like to reread. I would love to know what are some books that you would like to reread. Do you reread your books, and do you check anything out from the library? I love having physical copies, but obviously there is a limit to the space that you have in your household, although I do have stacks of books everywhere, so that's not a big deal. But they get expensive, as we all know, too. And so the library is also my best friend, as well as shopping for used books. I am lucky to get some early copies of books, and then there are the occasional ones that you just need to treat yourself to. If you don't mind taking a moment to subscribe, hit that like button, it really helps us out, and check out our community of readers that we have that are joining together over our love of reading and our love of Austen, and giving back to help support the 250 million children not in school globally. I look forward to seeing your thoughts down in the comments and connecting with you all again soon. Happy reading!